Welcome back to the show, the place where we dive deep into real estate, leadership, and the partnerships that help agents build real businesses and real freedom. I'm your host, Scott Kumler, and today I've got a very special guest who's absolutely dominating her niche. I'm excited to introduce Carolyn Castillo from Jacksonville, Florida. She's closing over 50 homes a year, and she's built her entire business around probate real estate. In this episode, Carolyn is breaking down her exact strategies and how she finds leads to how she builds relationships and what new agents should focus on if they want to succeed in probate today. If today's episode sparks some ideas for you and you're an agent looking to grow or partner up, I'd love to connect. You can call or text me at 623-387-2688 or schedule a Zoom meeting using my calendar link below to learn what a partnership with me and Carolyn could look like. And before we jump in, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss more interviews with top agents from around the country. All right, everyone, welcome. A very special guest today's podcast, Carolyn Castillo. Carolyn, welcome to the podcast today.
Thank you so much, Scott. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, as always, I'm kind of interested in hearing a little more about your background, what you did before you got into real estate and what got you into real estate in the first place. So if you want to kind of just tell the viewers, a little bit more about you.
Absolutely. So I've actually been in real estate a long time. I got my license when I was 18. As soon as I turned 18, I actually was a high school dropout. My mom was like, fine, you could drop out of school, but you got to get a full-time job. So it happened to be that my neighbor across the street ran a real estate rental office. So they actually employed me as a high school dropout. And I learned the phones at a very young age. And at that time, if you can even believe, it was before the internet, it was before all of those things. And they used to do kind of like those get you ads where it was like $500 on the ocean, you know? And so I would answer the phones and get the people to come in. And so I was seeing the business and I was seeing people come in and then they go out and look at properties and they buy a house. And then so as soon as I turned 18, I got my real estate license, and then I was one of the agents sitting out there getting the ups, as they would call it back then. And then I realized at a very early on that I didn't like driving people around. Okay. So it was kind of funner. I felt better sitting in behind the office doing the phones. So they said, okay, well, let's start finding us more apartments to rent. So I basically started outbound dialing landlords. And I was basically marketing for the real estate company to get listings. And so that was kind of how I, got started. And then when I figured out how to get listings, then I would sell one house when I was 18, and then I wouldn't work for like 6 months, so that was big money back then. And so I kind of piddled and paddled, then started having a bunch of kids. Okay. So I actually have four kids, two grandkids. And but I kind of just, dilly-dallied a little bit in real estate, just kind of work for friends, family, would do stuff like that. And then when my kids got to the point where I could actually have a full-time job again, I actually ended up getting into phone sales. So it was a really interesting part of my transition is I always kept my real estate license active, but to really make it your full-time job and like pay your bills and everything off of real estate when it's 100% commission, I didn't jump right back into that. I went into a phone sales job. I was actually there for 4 years, a top producer there, went on all the trips and won all the TVs and all the things. But then they left to North Carolina. And so I probably would actually still be there today had they not left because it was a pretty cush job. But it was working for someone else. So I was at a point in my life where I was like, gosh, I really got to make a change. What should I do? What should I do? And there was a realtor in my area, and she was hiring for an ISA position. And so I was like, gosh, this makes perfect sense. It's phone sales, which is where I just came from, and it's working at a real estate office. So she was actually the number one Keller Williams agent for the state of Florida at that time. So I basically went in to be her ISA. So I did all her outbound dialing for sale by owners, expired, circle prospecting, whatever she wanted me to call. She had an inbound department that did like the Zillow leads and all of that, but I was basically started her outbound department. And I stayed with her for about a year. It was a lot of fun, but because she was a big team, but her agents, funny enough, her agents couldn't close the deals.
Mm.
So they were used to kind of being on that team where, there would be, she was a third generation realtor for the area, and people would just call her. She had billboards. I mean, she's, a big deal around here. And they'd be like, oh, can Lori sell my house? And then her listing agents would go to those appointments. But when you're getting sent to a for sale by owner appointment, it's a whole different ball game? So she wanted me to stay and be on a listing agent team with her, but you know how it is on teams, they're not paying top dollar. So I literally left on a Friday, and on Monday, instead of calling for her, I started calling for myself. And the rest was pretty much history from there.
Nice. So you're probably the first person I've ever heard that was an ISA that said it was fun. So I want to dive a little bit deeper into that because obviously, one of the hardest things I think that most agents struggle with in this industry is making phone calls. I run a team. I see my team's phone calls all the time, and it's definitely a struggle to get people to pick up the phone and dial. So, what is it that you did that kept you motivated? Did you like have anything that you kind of thought about when you're making dials, or what? I guess what made it kind of fun for you when you're making phone calls?
I think from the perspective of an ISA, it's a little bit different when you're working as an agent, as a listing agent, right? But from an ISA's perspective, like you technically have a boss, right? And so, I came out of like that employee mindset. So I had I was working for a career for like 4 years. You had time breaks, you couldn't take lunch at this time. I came from all of that. So I went straight into working for Lori, and she's like just, a powerhouse. Like everybody's like super. So just being around like all of that success and, seeing all the money being made, I think is really what, motivated me. And I'm competitive by nature. So it's like, I'm gonna perform, and I want to be the best. So it was, and it was funny because she didn't have an outbound department at that time. I basically started her outbound department. She had no scripts or really anything. She just knew that, hey, there's something to this outbound dialing and everything, and I'm going to hire an agent. I'm going to hire somebody to do it. So I think the employee mindset versus working for yourself mindset, because guess what? If I didn't show up and I didn't perform, guess what was going to happen? I was going to get fired, right? And so it's so funny, right? Like how the psychology of the mind works, that you will perform for your boss better than you'll perform for yourself. Isn't that stupid? So yeah, so I think that primarily why it was so fun was because of that. But I did continue that work ethic, when I went out on my own. I remember when I was shopping for what brokerage I was gonna go to, I had to have an office. So I was like, that was a big deciding factor for me of what brokerage was actually gonna give me a private office. I couldn't have a cubicle because I talk loud. I've been kind of kicked out of like 3 offices because I'm so loud and I talk all day long. So my neighbor next to me, if the walls are too paper thin, they start complaining about me. But yeah, I went from an employee mindset straight into working for myself. And I was like, well, shit, I'm working for Lori for 40 hours a week. How am I going to work for myself any less? So for me, when I did that transition over, I had no business, right? I made a deal with myself. At that time, my expenses were very low, and I needed 6 grand to cover 3 months of my expenses. And I got one deal, and it was like for 6,500. And that's when I gave her my notice that I was leaving, and I went out on my own. And I had nothing to do but cold call. And funny enough, I also didn't go into for sale by owners and expireds. I just did straight cold calling. So I just had all the phone numbers in my market at that time. And I was just, hey, do you want to sell? Hey, do you want to sell? Hey, do you want to sell? And sure enough, I was finding deals, and it was history. I just started, and that was the first time in my adult, I want to say adult, but really from a, adult career in real estate that I started sitting at kitchen tables, and, being the listing agent for somebody. And honestly, Scott, I just kept that same work ethic, like if I was going to work 40 hours for this person, why not work even more for myself?
Yeah, I love that. And one of the things I always tell people, especially real estate agents that are first in this industry, is the hardest thing for real estate agents to do is to be their own boss, and like you mentioned, like if someone, it tells you you have to show up to work, you have to punch a clock, stuff like that, you're going to because you're going to get paid. But a lot of times, especially, in real estate, people don't realize that it's a time investment too. You have to put a lot of time in to eventually see the results, and so, but that's where they struggle because they don't see that time exchange for time for money. And so they hope that in the future they'll get paid, but it definitely becomes a struggle for a lot of people, if they don't have that accountability for themselves.
Yeah, I was
They're-
gonna say it took me so long to allow myself to go to my kids' activities during the day. So like how your kids have like, oh, morning awards, or I never got to go to that stuff, because I was working this job, and the job that I had, like the corporate career that I had was like there was no, like, you don't do that. Like your kids were sick, you had to figure out a way to get to work. And so when I became my own boss, I was like, it was kind of like a weird psyche thing because it was like, Carolyn, you can go to that. It was like it took me a while to allow myself the freedom to kind of do some of those things. And I think that more agents have to, determine that work ethic. It's like, could you imagine if restaurants, run their businesses like realtors, like, oh yeah, today I'm gonna show up, or tomorrow I'm not gonna show up, or a restaurant opens the doors. They don't know how many people are gonna walk in, right? They don't know they've got to have the lights, the food ready, all the things. And so as realtors, we have to, our schedule determines our success. But I was able, the cool part about being the ISA is that you got to sit in the environment.
Mhm.
Right? So you're looking at all this success around you. I'm looking at this realtor get these listings. I'm looking at these people celebrating closings. So I could see it, that it was possible and that it could be done. And I was cold calling for her for a year. So I knew I had the ability to set these appointments, but now I had to close them, which I never did before. But when you work for yourself and you don't just get like a layup Lindsay, you're willing to fight for it. If I'm gonna make, I think my first listing that I took was like, 300,000 or something. I mean, shit, that was like $9,000. That was more than I was making with her, and she was paying me not much at all. So it really motivated you to keep going.
Nice, nice. So, obviously, right now your main niche is probate. But and I know I was going to ask you what if you found probate right away or what you did. So it sounds like you did circle prospecting at the beginning. How did you end up finding probate as your main niche? Like, what made you get into that in the first place?
Yeah, so it was actually a referral, the first one that I got, which most realtors, that's how they run into probate. Like it comes to them. It's not, they're not looking for probate, it comes to them. It came to me actually at a very interesting time in my career because at that point I would be considered myself successful. I was doing about 20 transactions a year, by myself. But I was at this point in my career where I needed to kind of take it to the next level. So I need to either start doing like marketing or, whatever. I needed to kind of step into it more. And I was starting to get to the point where I didn't like the traditional client, where, you have a few listings going, it's almost like you got 10 bosses, and, just kind of like the pettiness of the negotiations sometimes. I'll never forget this guy, like almost losing a deal over a patio set outside for like 500 bucks. I'm like, oh my gosh, like, the negotiation was so embarrassing, that I had to be the face of it. But, just kind of people like, well, if I don't get my price, I'm not. So I was kind of just like, is this what I want to do? And then I got this referral, and the lady's like, she goes, well, you can't come to my house, which that's where we always go as a listing agent. You go sit at the house. She's like, no, I gotta meet you at my office. So I was like, okay, that's weird. So she comes to my office and she's like, listen, I inherited my dad's house, but his girlfriend will not let us into the property. My dad was like in his 80s and he got like a 30-year-old girlfriend. And she has wiped his accounts clean. She got herself put as the beneficiary on his stocks, on his all kinds of stuff. And now this is the last asset that her name is not on, and we want to get access to it and we want to sell it. So I'm like, sure, I can help you. And I have no idea what I'm getting myself involved in. And I'm like, has anybody gone over there and talking to her? No, she won't talk to anybody, this and that. And on top of that, dad had a reverse mortgage and they were getting ready to start the foreclosure process. So it was like the attorney had told her, hey, you're going to need to file an eviction. I'm like, an eviction's going to take anywhere from 3 to 6 months, especially if they know how to play the game.
Mhm.
So what does Carolyn do? I just drive over there.
Yeah.
I drive over there, knock on the door, and I just, got down on that lady's level, with no judgment, right? Just kind of understanding her needs, understanding what's going on. And I was able to basically do like a cash for keys. So I was able to get like $1,000 for this lady. We got her over into like a motel, was able to get all her stuff that she wanted, even though she kind of like robbed the guy a bit. And that's it. She was out of the house. And then I helped the family get a clean out crew to come clean it up, doll it up, put it on the market, sold like phew, super fast. And I was like, oh my gosh, I love this because it wasn't about like, it was about solving a problem, it was about like helping somebody like figure something out, and it really ignited. Like maybe some realtors would have came in contact with that and they would have been like, do not, never doing that again. But something really lit up inside of me. And then I started just saying like, what is probate? Like, period. Like, what even is probate? How do I find more of these? And I found out that they're a lead list. You can buy this list, okay? And when I first started doing it, I wasn't all in like I am now. I just added it as part of everything else that I was doing at that time. And I just was working with investors, helping them like just do cash offers and stuff like that. Because the people that I bought the leads from, that's kind of what they had said. Like, this is like for cash, this is for investors. And I liked it because the investors were buying them, fixing them up, and then I was selling them. So it was like buy one, get one free. And you know how investors are. They don't complain. They're very easygoing to deal with. So I was like, that's it. Screw the traditional market. I'm working with investors. Okay. And but then I had this one case and I went to the family's house and it was two boys, 19 and 20. Their mom went to the hospital, never came back. And I was like, wow, I saw everything that they were kind of going through, like the house was full of stuff, like mom's keys were on the counter, laundry was in the dryer, dishes in the sink. They didn't know about the court process. The bills were coming in. Like I kind of for the first time saw kind of like the humanitarian side of it. And that's when I realized I was like, you know what? These kids, yes, we can give them the cash offer, but honestly, they need every dollar they can get to continue on their life. So I said, told them that I would help them, clean up the house, get everything organized. They were really overwhelmed by the attorney. They said they didn't really understand everything. So I got involved with their attorney. Just I got involved with them in a way that I had never gotten involved with any other case before. And pretty much that was it. It was a banana split. At that point, I realized that it's not just the real estate, it's actually all these things that the families are dealing with. And if you can be the solution, to this kind of problems that they have, then it just lays you up perfectly to be, the real estate person that they do the transaction with.
Yeah, I love that you talk about the humanity because I feel like a lot of real estate agents forget that these are human beings on the other side of the transaction. It's not just a transaction, but there are definitely human beings, emotions. Obviously you've dealt with it a lot. Where you deal with whether it's a buyer or seller. That there's a lot of emotions involved with buying a home, selling a home because it's a huge transaction, and so I think that's something that a lot of real estate agents need to like understand is that there are human beings, and so everyone deals with things differently, and so our job as real estate agents is to kind of be that like even keel logical voice in their head and not get too emotional, not get and help them understand what's going on with every single transaction they do. So at that point, did you start when you started doing that? Did you stop like working with the investors then? You kind of focus more on just like traditional like probate.
Yeah, I still work with investors to this day just because, you are most the people that pass away are older people. I mean, yes, you have like that case and, I'm right now working with a mom that had to bury her son. Like, nobody wants that death happens, right? Like nobody's anticipating it, right? But for the most part, it's older people. It's just the birds and bees of life. And, like I was at a house today. This one happens to be in really good shape. However, it's like a time capsule from the 50s. Okay. Like wallpaper, carpet, blue bathroom. I mean, it's mint condition. Okay. But, not all of them are like that. Like sometimes, this year I had a guy that inherited not one, but two hoarder houses.
Mm.
Okay. So sometimes people, as they get older, they stop taking care, they let things go. The amount of times I hear from executors that they're like, we tried to have the AC guy go over to mom's house, but she wouldn't let anybody in. Like they kind of get a little paranoid towards the end there where they don't want people coming over and stuff. So in those cases, those are investor houses, right? Those are houses that can't get financing, are in really poor shape, right? So you are going to 100% work with investors in probate. However, the difference is that you can offer both options, so like this family that I went to today, yes, an investor would love this house because it's all original, right? They want to gut it, they want to redo it. However, there's nothing materially wrong with this house.
Mm.
So it could get financing. A first-time home buyer could buy this house, right? So do you want to work with an investor and get about 40% of fair market value, or would you rather list it on the property, pay a real estate commission, and get the absolute top dollar? Now, the other thing, Scott, is that you're not dealing with one seller in probate, right? So husband and wife, it's one bank account most of the times, right? Well, in probate, you're talking about maybe a family of five, right? So that money, every penny makes a difference with families, so that's my goal is to try to help them get as much money as possible while we alleviate, the issues that they may have around the case.
Yeah, and I love you mentioned about the five bank accounts, and that's something that I think is also very important because like you're dealing with probably a lot of different parties. Like I know for example myself, I've sometimes dealt with worked with people who are getting divorced, and now you have to deal with like a couple different conversations where maybe a husband and wife that just don't get along anymore, and stuff like that. But I'm assuming the same thing might happen with probate too, where you have families that just don't agree on the correct path forward. Is that something that you normally have to deal with a lot? And then if so, how do you like overcome dealing with some of those type of issues?
So it does come up. It's not every single family, but definitely family conflicts are a thing, it's kind of like that big brother, little brother syndrome. Like, you're not going to tell me what to do. Like, it's almost like all the old riffs from the past just kind of surface. When people grow up, like not all families are just like singing Kumbaya together, kind of like when everybody grows up, they kind of go, everybody's doing their own thing. And everyone may be civil and they may be, fine. But when it comes to now, holy shit, now we're like real estate investors together. Now we own this property together. Now the bills have to be paid. Who's going to pay the light bill? Who's paying the taxes? Who's paying the mortgage, right? Now all of a sudden, money's involved, family's involved, all the things. That's where you can start seeing like different personalities show up. And so I basically act as like a neutral party. So sometimes you'll get on the phone with someone and they'll say, well, I want to sell, but my brother, like, he's impossible to deal with. He's like, he won't even talk to the attorney. Like, I just don't think we're going to be able to sell, and I'll just basically have the consult with that person and say, well, if I can get your brother to get on board, can we agree to do business together? And they're like, oh, well, if you get my brother, absolutely, and then, I call the brother and the brother's like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad you called. My sister is such a, so it's kind of like it's just a thing with them, and the attorneys don't really get involved in that degree. Like if what attorneys do is they just send out the email, they send, the notarized copy to the house, and that's it. They don't follow up, they don't try to, communicate or anything like that. So if the person doesn't sign the papers, if they don't get it returned to the office, then they advise the executor that basically we have to do legal action. We got to do a partition, right? And a partition is money, time, and a big pain in the butt. So with me, that's the cool part is that I can just have a civil conversation. And it's an easy negotiation, Scott, because in probate, like basically, if you have to go to partition, right? So let's say that one family member is literally not answering the phone. Let's just say, right? And they say, okay, we're going to do the legal process called a partition. It goes before the judge. They have to respond. So, similar like a foreclosure notice or something, you've got 20 days to respond. You don't respond, the court is going to push it forward and they're going to award it to be sold, right? But let's say that you do respond and you do show up to the court, okay? The judge is basically going to say to that person, do you have the means to buy this property? Okay. No, Your Honor, I don't have the means to buy this property. Okay, well, I immediately has to be sold. That's it. Like there are rights. Not one person cannot just hold up an entire family from not being able to sell. So it actually becomes an easy negotiation because sorry, my daughter's dragging my dog out.
No, no problem.
It actually becomes an easy negotiation because when you talk to the family member that's not getting along, you say, "Listen, I'm here to help you, so we can do this the nice way, the good way, but if not, then we are going to go to plan B and we're going to take it to the legal process." So it's like it's an easy negotiation, and most of the time the people are happy that I call. They're happy because they just don't want to deal with that family member. But it's literally like life-changing opportunity as a real estate advisor, right? Because if I didn't talk to that person, if they didn't have someone like me to kind of bridge that gap, then these houses end up in tax liens, they end up in foreclosure, because the family can't pull it together and they don't want to keep paying for legal action to pursue it.
Yep, yep. Awesome. Yeah, I definitely love that. So now if you're talking to like a new agent, and I know you do a lot of like probate coaching and stuff like that, outside of just real estate, but if you're talking to a new agent or just an agent that wants to get into probate altogether, what is one advice that you would give to someone that's looking to get into probate for the first time?
Start looking at what probate is in your state. Just start, Googling, probate in the state of Florida, how to sell an inherited property, and I always recommend don't look at one person's website, look at 10. And person, I mean attorney, right? Because the attorneys are going to be the voice piece of explaining the law in your area, right? One of the mistakes I made early on was just listening to one attorney's perspective or one attorney's way of doing business. And similar like realtors, not all realtors are equally aligned, you know? So you can get with one realtor that knows how to do a simultaneous closing and how to do a bridge loan and pull money out. Like they're very creative and they know how to get things done. And another realtor tells you, oh no, it can't be done. You can't do that, you know? So I always say just, look into it. But I think it's great for new agents to get into probate, to be honest. Like, one of the good things about probate is that people don't care about your accolades, right? So that's a big thing when you're first getting into real estate and especially becoming a listing agent, right? So when you go on these for sale by owners or these expired appointments, like a lot of times not even your family and friends want to give you business.
Yeah.
When you just get into the business. They're like, dude, I know you. Like, you don't know how to sell a house. Like, So, you have to kind of build up that reputation when you're in traditional sales, right? And then when you go on those for sale by owners and expires appointments, you got to be able to show if you work with like a good team, you can use your team, right? This is what we've done. These are all the houses we sell in the community. But if you're just by yourself, you don't really have all that, right? But in probate, people are not looking for that. People are looking for a solution to their problems. So as long as you can understand what probate is, understand what problems these people have, and how to be a resource, how to be a solution for that, then it's like I always make a joke. It's like we do probate. It's like, oh yeah, and by the way, we also sell the house. Like there's not a big fight on commissions, like how much you're charging people. There's just so many bonuses to it. There's not a lot of competition. The most of the competition is investors,
Mhm.
right? So we can separate ourselves from that, right? We're helping them get more money. We're helping them resolve these issues. So I think for a new agent, it can be a really good opportunity to just start their feet in that. And it's building a business, right, Scott? It's like this doesn't happen overnight. You're not going to get your license, and the next thing you know, you're going to be just, cranking out deals. Like the biggest problem for a new agent is where you're getting your business.
Mhm.
Where are you getting your next deal? You're only as good as your last deal.
Yeah.
Once your house closes, you're technically unemployed, and that was my mission as a listing agent is how do I have consistent business? How do I just have consistent work that never dries up, And when I did traditional sales, I always found myself on that wheel
Mhm.
of like, like where's my next deal? Where's my next deal? But once I got into probate, it's like I always have a full pipeline. It's like I have pendings, I have actives on the market, and I have properties that are coming in. And so it just always is just like revolving. And that's what I really love about it.
Yeah, I love what you said that once you close your last deal, you're technically unemployed. So I'm gonna start using that from now on, and, and
Is
stuff.
it?
I like it. So obviously, one of the things I do want to kind of talk about real quick is obviously we're part of the same organization within EXP. We're both part of the Wolf Pack. I do want to ask you because I don't think I've ever asked you this before. How long have you been with EXP and the Wolf Pack? And then when you originally jumped over here, what made you decide to make the move from the brokerage that you were with?
Yeah, so I actually joined during COVID, and as many things changed in the world, and I was at Remax. So, ever since I was that 18-year-old real estate agent, I always had like this fantasy about Remax. I think because they were always doing the commercials and it was kind of like this like image of prestige, like, oh, Remax. And at that time, Remax didn't just hire anyone. Like you did have to have a certain level of expertise, a certain level of experience. And so when I had gotten to the point that I was like, and then my current brokerage, they weren't willing to give me more money. So I went looking and I interviewed with Remax. They took me in and I was so excited. I'll never forget it. And then I got there and I'm like, this is it, like this is what I've been dreaming of, and it's literally like was closed door, like all the top performers there, nobody wanted to collaborate or share any information. I thought for sure the broker was gonna like take me up under his wing and like show me the way, like None of that happened, Scott. Zero. Like none of that happened. And then like the training they had was from the 80s, like some guy, washed up from the 80s. And COVID happened, right? So I was already kind of like not liking it. And then Remax didn't even know how to operate. They were completely in shambles when COVID happened. And I was in Florida, so it was like the epicenter, like I literally have pictures. Is this so embarrassing, the level that we all went to? I have pictures, okay, of a gas mask. And I was one of the first agents in my office that ventured out, but I had an appraisal and I'm like, well, what the heck? I'm going. And I had on this huge gas mask. I remember the appraiser being so jealous of my mask. Where'd you get it? And and in that time I just realized like, man, this company is decrepit. I was like, and also I was like, I need to, be marketing myself. And that's what I was looking for when I went to Remax. Remember, I told you I was at this part of my career where I needed to start like marketing myself. Up until that time, I did zero marketing. No Facebook, no Instagram, nothing, just cold calls. Okay. And I was expecting these high dreams of Remax. I was going to be like on the commercials and stuff like that. And it was like nothing. It was absolutely nothing. And so guess who I ran into? Mike Sherrard. Anybody looking to learn how to market themselves is going to find Mike Sherrard. So I found Mike in 2020. The funny thing about it, and I'm very proud of this statistic, is I was like the one of the first five people that signed up with Mike Sherrard. So, yeah, so he had joined in 2020 as well. And everything that he shared with me about eXp Realty, it was like 100% contrast of what Remax was doing. It was a virtual world. They were fully operational. There was no shutdowns. They had all this training done by icon agents from around the country. It wasn't some washed up salesman from the 80s. And then Mike was like, "Yeah, and by the way, if you also, sign up through me, I'm going to teach you how to start your YouTube channel, start your Facebook, start everything." I was like, "Score, take me." So I've been with Mike ever since, and I started my YouTube channel with Mike. I started my Instagram, Facebook, everything. He did my initial branding and everything that I have for myself. And yeah, it's been a really incredible journey. I'm so happy I made the choice. And at that time, Scott, it was like a black sheep. I had told my colleagues that I joined eXp Realty and it was like a laughing stock. Like, "Oh my gosh, they got you." And I remember being like, "What's wrong with you guys?" And like half of them are now with EXP now. So jokes on them.
It's kind of funny. I know agents like that too. That were like, "Oh, I've been over to EXP," and the next thing you know, they're over at EXP. But one of the things I thought was super interesting, and you kind of alluded to it, is like a lot of times people think of like EXP as a cloud-based brokerage and think there's like not community and stuff like that. Like that could be for the truth. Like at my previous brokerage, is a brick and mortar, and kind of like yours was with Remax, right? Office space, all that stuff. But there was no collaboration. That's kind of felt my previous brokerage too. But with EXP, with like a cloud-based brokerage, I mean, there's like more collaboration than I've ever seen before. And there's a lot more connectivity. Even though a lot of times it's over Zoom, you feel like you know them a little bit better. Which is definitely a great thing to have. So that's interesting. So yeah, so you were one of the first persons over at Mike Sherrard. So you've been riding the wave up, man. I mean, obviously fastest growing group within EXP, and that's super cool. So if there is an agent that's watching this right now, and maybe they want to get more involved in probate and want to kind of reach out to you to find out either what coaching looks like or like what a partnership looks like, what's the best way for someone to get a hold of you?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram, YouTube, at Absolute Top Dollar in both places. And then you can head over to my channel, book a call with me, and have a consultation, find out more about probate, and see if it's a good niche for you. I'm looking for probate agents all over the country, maybe even globally. Okay, I believe that probate is the birds and bees, you know, so it's never going to go out of style. When the market was hot, trust me, we were selling, couldn't keep houses long enough to sell them. And when the market's not hot, like we are today, people are still dying and people are still needing houses to sell. So I've been very blessed to be still do transacting all throughout the year. And this is a niche that we need more agents in. It shouldn't just be dominated by investors. So if you're interested in probate, hit me up. Let's have a conversation and partner with me and Scott because Scott's in Arizona and Arizona is a retirement state. And there's a lot of people that go to Arizona to retire in the West Coast, right? And so this is something that, you know, agents in that area, just like Florida, we have a joke. It says it's Florida is heaven's waiting room, you know? So states like, you know, it's a little bit different, like Ohio or, you know,
Mhm.
Indiana, you know, it's not like a big retirement flock to these states, but in the sun states, you know, like California, Florida, Arizona, I mean, this is a big deal. People pass away, their family lives in other states, and you can be that go-to solution that is helping families through this whole process. And I'd love to mentor you and coach you through it. I actually have a whole entire training program from cold calling all the way to closing every single step that you have to do. So I'm happy to help.
Awesome. I definitely love it. And I love what you said about the fact that, it's kind of a niche that, even pardon the bad pun, but that never dies, right? Like it just keeps going on and on and on because someone's always passing away. Unfortunately, it's the facts of life. So, yeah. So again, I'm going to put Carolyn's contact information below this video along with my contact information. Please, if you do reach out to either one of us, just let us know where you saw us at. So that way we can partner together. We can with, especially with EXP with co-sponsorship, we can definitely work and you can kind of get both sides of the coin as far as coaching and mentorship from both of us. So I appreciate you, Carolyn, for hopping on today. It's definitely been an amazing experience learning about probate, and I hope to talk to you soon.
All right. Thank you so much.
All right, bye, guys.
Bye.